Now what about Poe Dameron? Poe Dameron, who is male, has a height of z-score of 0. What does this reveal about his height? Well, remember that if your z-score is 0, that means that your value is the mean. Okay, so that means that if we go back and look at the mean was 70.2 inches. So that's how tall Poe Dameron is. All right, now we've looked at so far people that are tall, people that are average in case of Poe Dameron or above average. Right? All right, what about people that are shorter? So Princess Leia is 5 feet 1 inches, while her twin brother Luke is 5 feet 6 inches. Which one is relatively shorter? Right, explain using the z-scores. Okay, well, first of all, we need to figure a couple things out here. So 5 feet 1 inches would be 5 times 12 plus 1, which is 61 inches tall, just so we know. And 5 foot 6 is 5 times 12 plus 6, which is 66 inches tall. Just so we have those numbers for those two folks. All right, why did I do that? Well, because I'm going to need it because I want to find the z-scores. All right, so let's do Leia first. So for Leia, the z-score would be her value, which is 61, take away the mean. All right, well, the mean would be the mean for women, so I have to go back a page and find it. This is why I labeled them up here. All right, so 64.8, and the standard deviation is 2.79. So 64.8 divide by 2.79. All right, I'll go find that in a second. But first I'm going to set up Luke, and then I'll go do both of them together in Desmos. His z-score would be 66. Take away, the mean for men was 70.2, and the standard deviation was 2.99. Okay, so we need to go find both of those values. So let me go grab Desmos. All right, I can just put it right here. So I'm going to hit division first to make a fraction. 61 minus 64.8, 2.79, right? So there's Leia's score. I hit division to make the fraction. 70.2, 66 minus 70.2 divided by 2.99. Okay, so his z-score is negative 1.405, right? Because that 6 would round that 4 up down here. And then she is negative 1.362. Now you'll notice they're both negative because they're both short, right? So the question becomes, who is relatively shorter, right? Absolutely shorter is her, right? In relation to the group, she is short. Not in relation to group. When you stand the two of them next to each other, right? She is shorter. But if you compare to the group, who is shorter? Well, he is, because he's further to the left. In other words, if you think of it as a number line, right? Here's 0 right here. So Poe Dameron's right there, right? So if you look at Leia, Leia is over here at negative 1.362, right? But Luke is at negative 1.405. He's further to the left, right? And by the way, on the other side, if you think of it this way, Han was right here at positive 0.93 something. This is not to scale, but and Rey was over here, right? So Rey was taller because she's further to the right, right? Her z-score is further to the right. It's higher. And Luke is shorter, right? Leia's taller, Luke is shorter, right? Because his z-score is further to the left. So we'll say, oops, better make sure we know that we're talking about shorter. So Luke is shorter because his z-score is less than Leia's. And again, he's actually taller than her if you stand them next to each other, but he is taller in relation to all men than she is in relation to all women. And you can see it right here, right? Shorter is this direction, right to the left. Taller is this direction. Which actually leads us to an important point. How do we know whether somebody is unusually tall or unusually short? So we learned that anything beyond 2 standard deviations away from the mean for a symmetrical distribution, which we won't always have symmetrical ones, but for our purposes, our rule of thumb is anything beyond 2 standard deviations away is unusual. Okay, so let's think about what this means on the number line that I just drew. Here it is right here, right? So on your number line, 0 is the middle, right? So anybody who is at the middle scored the mean, right? Like Poe Dameron, right? Anything beyond 2, so there's 1, 2, 3, and so on. So this is 2 standard deviations away, right? And then there's -1, -2, -3, and so on. Right? So there's -2 right there. So anything that is unusually large would be anything greater than 2, right? More than 2 to the right. Oh, actually, let me highlight these in a different color. More than 2. Or the z is more than 2, I guess I should say. So the z is more than 2. This is unusually large, being over here. Right? The z is more than 2. So if your z-score is more than 2, you're unusually large. All right, usually people get that one okay. But what if it's unusually small? Right? Luke and Leia are not actually unusually short. They're short, but they're not unusually short because they're not quite to 2 standard deviations away. So anything over here would be unusually short. So the z is less than -2. Right? Smaller than -2, or right, less than -2. Which, let's put it another way. So the not unusual values are right here. So anywhere between -2 and 2, technically including -2 and 2, right? So if your z-scores are between -2 and 2, that is not unusual, right? From here, and technically it's including the -2 and 2, right? They are not unusual. This is unusually large over here, and this is unusually small over here. And anywhere from -2 to 2 is not unusual. Oh, and don't forget, these are larger values. These are smaller values, right? Small is over on this side. Large is over on this side. All right, so let's look at Captain Phasma. So she's a female commander of the First Order's Legion of Stormtroopers. She is 6 feet 6 inches tall. We're going to calculate her z-score. Okay. Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to figure out how tall this is. So 6 times, there's 12 inches in a foot, 6 feet, so 6 times 12 plus 6 would make 72 plus 6, which is 78 inches tall. Okay, so the z-score. Z is always the value minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. Okay, so her value is 78. Take away, the mean for females was 64.8, and we divide by the standard deviation, which is 2.79. And again, use parentheses or don't use parentheses. It's fine either way. I just put them in there to kind of remind you of how this works. And remember, there's no units on any of this. It's not inches, not nothing, right? They just are a value, right? Because what it's telling you is how many standard deviations above or below the mean you are. I almost screwed that up. You got to make sure you hit division first to make the fraction. Then you type in the values. So 78 take away 64.8 divided by 2.79, and we get 4.731. Okay, so what does this reveal? Well, she is unusually tall is what it reveals. Right, so this is her z-score right here. So I calculated that, so I'm going to put a box around that because it told me to. So what does this reveal? So Captain Phasma is unusually tall because her z-score is above 2. Right? She's over here on this side. Now suppose I tell you that Yoda has a z-score of negative 3.14. What would that reveal about Yoda? Well, that would mean that Yoda is unusually short because he's over here, right? Anything past negative 2, so from negative 2 onward, but not including negative 2 itself, right? So Yoda is unusually short. Oops, short. I can't spell the word short. Because his z-score is below negative 2. As opposed to, let's say, Luke and Leia. Luke and Leia were short, but not unusually short, because their z-scores were between negative 2 and 2. Same thing with uh, Poe Dameron, right? Poe Dameron's not unusual, not unusual. None of these people are unusual. His z-score was 0, right? So if his z-score is 0, he's not unusual. Z-score of negative 1.362, those are not unusual. Han and Rey are both not unusual, right? Even Kylo Ren, as tall and intimidating as he is not unusually tall, right? Because his z-score is only 1.605. The only people that are unusually tall, well, the only person that was unusually tall is Captain Phasma that we know of, and the only person that was unusually short is Yoda, because their z-scores were not between negative 2 and 2.